So before we introduce you about the topic, we just want to show you the image that we're 100% sure that if you are working right now or just your daily life, you will experience this situation. And we guess that by seeing that picture, you will know what the topic is about. And if for any reason you still cannot guess, so the topic is the conflict. And we are Team Blue. We're moving to the outline. In the outline, I will talk about the introduction, and there are 4 types of conflicts. And then we move to the case study exploration, the recommendation, and last thing is about the conclusion. So moving to the conflict. We all know what is about a conflict, but I want to uh, revamp the definition again once more time. According to MSG, conflict is a clash between two individuals from different in thinking, in attitude, understanding, and interest. Seriously, the conflict can lead to the heat argument, physical abuse, and it can even change your whole relationship. Moreover, the conflict is not simple. We have 4 types of conflict, and my friend Cora will introduce you one of them.
So I'll start you off with interpersonal conflict. This is conflict within yourself, so an internal conflict. This can be a goal conflict or cognitive conflict, and it's usually regarding making a decision. So the easiest way to explain it is what do you want to do versus what should you do? So often it's consciousness. For example, in a workplace, if you see your colleague doing something incorrectly or doing something that's not right, you might be outweighing whether you should tell your superior or not because you savor the relationship with that person. So this is your internal conflict. You're trying to make a decision. This can be approach versus approach, so a decision versus a decision, or it could be a decision versus just avoiding the whole thing. So that's approach versus avoidance. Moving on to the next slide. I'll be talking about interpersonal conflict. So this is conflict between two individuals, the dynamic process that arises among individuals who experience negative emotional reactions to perceived disagreement. So there was a Forbes article that described it quite well, the impact of COVID on the workplace conflict. Within COVID, there was a lot of distress for everybody, and with heightened stress, there's always a heightened likelihood of conflict arising because everybody's a little on edge. So this was, for example, in quarantine, I feel like we can all relate. When you were at home with your family 24 hours of the day, there's bound to be some conflict there. I want to just quickly highlight a case study that I read that was they did in the healthcare industry. So with hospital staff, obviously there was a large staff shortage through COVID, and there was a lot of regulations and just a lot of problems that arose through that, but also conflict increased immensely in the workplace among these staff because they were under so much pressure. So they actually tried to use interpersonal psychotherapy, which is usually used in a completely different context within the medical staff. And they actually saw really great results from that. So that is a way of coping with interpersonal conflict. I'm now going to pass on to Danny.
Thanks, Cora. So having a look now at conflict through the scope of intragroup and intergroup. So there's quite a lot of overlap between intragroup and intergroup so for intragroup, it's generally the conflict that arises between members of the same smaller group or subculture. So and some of the main factors that contribute to these conflicts is an asymmetry in beliefs, norms, and the perceived treatment within that group. So if there's incompatible cultures, or if someone doesn't quite align with the norms of the group, they can very quickly either feel alienated or be alienated, which will cause tension and conflict. Additionally, perceived treatment. So if someone feels that someone else is being favored over them, or if someone feels hard done by, that is also a cause for conflict and tension. Additionally, just different communication styles. So if someone is a bit more passive in their communication and they interact with someone who's a bit more active in their communication, they may see the other person as potentially blunt or rude. Looking at intergroup, this conflict is the one that exists between different cliques or subcultures within an organization. So it's the same factors as intragroup. So different beliefs, norms, and feeling that other groups are treated differently. But it's, as the name suggests, it's between different groups rather than members of the same group. Also, within an organization, if the different groups and subcultures are working towards different goals and objectives, this can also cause conflict as certain steps that are taken to achieve the goal may not be compatible or in the best interests of other groups. So looking at a workplace example of both of these, for intragroup, within my workplace, there's a large cultural divide. So more than half of the team members are of an Iranian background, which at times has this cultural difference has made some people feel that certain interactions have been either inappropriate or a bit rude when it's just a cultural kind of incompatibility. Looking at intergroup, the main one that has arisen is favoritism and perceived favoritism between the head office, where the director is stationed, and the parallel offices, which generally are a little bit neglected. So that's intragroup and intergroup. So next I'll be passing over to Toby, who will talk about inter-organizational conflict.
Thank you, Danny. And so instead of conflicts between people directly, as we have discussed, inter-organizational conflict is usually seen as conflicts between organizations. For example, companies may be competing for market share or competing to secure limited resources and suppliers. When organizations try to overtake their rivals, they could certainly bring in conflicts towards their goals. Take the EV market as an example. It has been a rapidly growing market in the last decade, but there weren't many automakers focusing on the EV until Tesla came along. And even when Tesla started selling its EVs, other major automakers didn't consider Tesla to be a rival, given the very limited resources and cash flow it had. Then, as Tesla showed success in selling its EV models and owning more of the market share, it began to grab more attention from the news, social media, and also the traditional car buyers. The government also started giving incentives to both the automakers and car buyers to encourage more EVs on the road. Although major companies had started to notice Tesla as a competitor, they were a step behind in the EV market share. The EV market was growing rapidly, and with the support from the government, more automakers began to invest more in EV and releasing more EV models, including the hybrid versions. As the result of that, in 2020, there were around 3 million new EV registered, and the number doubled in the following year. Within 2 years, the number of new EVs had quadrupled, and we can also see the competition in the EV market had also brought in new automakers such as Lucid, Rivian, and Genesis. On the supplier side, as the number of electric vehicles increases, the need for batteries also increases. EV automakers are competing to secure long-term supplies of batteries, and the battery industry is also looking to build cheaper, safer, and fast-charging batteries that are made from widely available raw materials. And overall, the competition in the EV market has accelerated innovation in vehicle design and manufacturing processes, as well as in the energy storage industry. And so customers are getting more options to choose cheaper, greener, and more innovative vehicles. I'll now pass to Dinh for our case study on Tesla.
Thank you, Zobi. So as Danny have said, so within Tesla, the conflict that we can see here is the interpersonal and intergroup. For like interpersonal, it's like the employees who's going to follow or not. And as for the intergroup, for the intergroup, it's like for the people who follows the hustle culture that has been cultivated by Elon Musk, or those employees who wants to follow the culture of work-life balance. As you can see, there's two opposing groups, and the one of the opposing groups is the leader of the organization, who is a symbolic and symbolic figure, as he is a charismatic figure within the organization, similar to the late Steve Jobs, as that both are not hesitant with their words. And from us, sometimes you can see the extent it can be considered as quite authoritarian by some commentators, because as his distrust of remote working is seen as outdated, compared to contemporaries such as Twitter, who has offered permanent remote working to their employees. And also, like, every time that he utters his word, especially on Twitter, it caused the shares of Tesla to drop significantly, though. And as you can see, there's on the Bowman, the frameworks, you can see the political and the symbolic is intermingled. And moving on to the recommendations by Garima.
Thank you, Dean. Okay, so I will be talking about the recommendations. So the first recommendation would be practicing appropriate accountability for actions. So conflict in a workspace is inevitable. You just cannot avoid it. So best would be to not shy away from it. And just like how in the case of Tesla, it is the duty of Elon Musk to take full responsibility and to take accountability for whatever has happened and work towards the solution. The second is avoid making rash decisions. So again, I would like to take up the case of Tesla, where rash decisions were made and the employees were asked to come back into the workspace and work 40 hours a day. So they were given two options: either you come back or you just leave and just go work somewhere else. And that too was during the pandemic. So it is very important to take into account the environment, whatever's going on, and like how COVID was going on and everybody was going through a very tough time. So these things should have been taken into consideration, and then decisions should have been based on that analysis. The third one would be transparency in communication and feedback. So poor communication, as you all know, is one of the biggest reasons for conflict. So it is very essential that the communication is transparent, and same goes for the feedback from the employee side. The fourth would be keeping the communication respectful, extremely important. Very important that the company invests in a culture of positive employee relations in order to maintain a healthy workspace environment, and which typically includes treating the staff with dignity, respect, which has been an issue in the case of Tesla. Fifth would be to involve the HR department whenever it seems appropriate. So involving somebody from the HR department could be, a good option when everything seems to go wrong. And when there's a lot of tension between the employees or the management, so to have an unbiased opinion from somebody, I think it's a good thing. And that person could be a neutral voice of reason, as and when required. And now Khan would be talking about the conclusion.
Thank you very much. So now we move to the conclusion. We can conclude that there are 4 types of conflict, as my friend already told you. About a recommendation, Garima already detailing on everything, so I just conclude the 5 keywords for the recommendation, which is appropriate your respect, decision making, thinking carefully about decide something, communication first, respect their idea, so everybody will respect your idea. And lastly, HR department have to involve to everything before the conflict start. So last but not least, we conclude that conflict is like the Thanos in Marvel University. This is the inevitable thing. We can hide or avoid it, but we can turn the bad conflict into the good conflict. Thank you everyone for no more conflict. And then first slide. Thank you. So you have any question?